Made me want to dance. I felt myself kind of wanting to do this here, but I didn't. Yeah. All right. So, at least the reason some of you are here is because you know what we're going to talk about. Tomorrow is Earth Day. It will be my 55th. I was young, but not that young, in 1970 when the first Earth Day occurred. The day marks the first time I knew that environmental issues would be the focus of my education and career. It was obviously brought on by a lot of nasty stuff that was going on. Some of you here probably don't remember Love Canal or the first major oil spill off the coast of California. Congress finally got it together to pass the National Environmental Policy Act, which set up a structure for doing environmental impact statements for major actions that could affect the environment. Clean Air Act came almost immediately after that. Clean Water Act a couple years later. All of these things are still important laws that are on the radar screens of environmental activists that you are going to hear from today. I'm sure the day had similar meaning for Matt and Andy, but for many people, it's lost its luster. As the annual celebration of our public commitment to protect the environment, it's seen a little bit more superficial these days, if not, a castaway, and we don't actually think that's okay. So we think a reboot is in order. Obviously, we know this crowd is probably more attuned to nature and the natural environment than many, but speaking to the choir is often what we do here. Matt and Andy are going to talk about some of the positive developments that keep us hopeful for or about our environmental future. And then I'll follow with some thoughts about how we as individuals can maintain the focus and make progress without kind of losing our minds or getting in fights with people who don't agree with us. So Matt.
I'm just going to hold this. I think it'll be easier that way. Thanks, Peyton. Greetings. I'm Matt, and for those who don't know me, and I the topic, what I had suggested today's topic of sort of a case for hope, and I'm going to talk about climate change. And talking about hope and climate change is not the most popular topic out there, if you haven't noticed. So bear with me a little bit, and let me start with just position myself here. I graduated high school in 1989. That's 1 year after James Hansen of NOAA, the famous scientist, testified before Congress that climate change was definitely happening and humans were definitely responsible. So my first paper in college that I wrote was about the likely impacts of climate change on our parks. In fact, the last 35 years, my life has been more or less dedicated to addressing environmental concerns. I grew up in Washington State, and so while climate was starting to be a big issue then, in 1989, old growth logging, if you all remember, spotted owl, everyone remember that? Yeah, that was the big issue. And in fact, my first science job, I became a scientist, was studying seabirds in the Gulf of Alaska after the Exxon Valdez oil spill. And so those things really kind of set the trajectory of my life. And I'll tell you, but when it comes to climate, over those 35 years, I have never been as hopeful about our ability to address climate change as I am this week. And so I will explain that, but I'm going to take a little diversion first. So when I started, talking about our Earth Day history, my first Earth Day that I really celebrated was 1990. That was the 20th anniversary of Earth Day. This was in Seattle. And, I remember, the big issues again were like the hole in the ozone layer and, things that we were addressing there. And by the time I went to grad school at Cornell and started here at Appalachian Voices in Boone in 2001, so 23 years ago. And we joke a lot. The membership premiums for people who became a member of Appalachian Voices at that time, you had two choices. There were two books. We had a coffee table book called An Appalachian Tragedy, and we had a book called The Dying of the Trees. So pretty uplifting stuff. But you know, if folks remember 20 years ago, the big issue that we were fighting was the haze, the amount of haze, the blocking the views off the Blue Ridge Parkway, and the acid rain killing the trees. At the high, and people remember the dying of the trees, the acid rain that was happening. When's the last time you heard about that? About trees dying along the Blue Ridge Parkway? I'm curious. Anyone heard about it in the last couple of years? I'm seeing a lot of heads shaking. When's the last time you heard about the old growth logging in the Pacific Northwest or the hole in the ozone layer? Haven't heard much about those. What happened? Did we just lose those and go on to fight the next battle, or did somebody forget to have a victory party? I think we forgot the victory party, didn't we? Because on all of the issue after issue, when we look at I mean, not that the, you know, air pollution is not solved, right? We have hazy days off the parkway, but compared to what it was 20 years ago, that pollution's down by about 85% on the average summer day. And it's not that there aren't other more, you know, very important issues to move on to, but I've noticed in my 35 years of doing this, I feel like I'm noticing a pattern here. And that's what I kind of want to lift up today. There's this pattern of moving on to the next existential issue and not really kind of taking stock of where we came from and what we have accomplished. And so, you know, I think that I'm not going to really try to answer why. Maybe in the question and answer, if there's time, we can discuss a little bit about why. But, you know, I think that we all feel a little bit, there's a sort of a sense of, well, we don't want to let them off the hook. You know, if we start celebrating stuff, well, then everyone's going to think everything's rosy and go on with their lives, and we're not going to do this stuff. And, you know, what do I know? Maybe that's true. I suspect, however, if there's one thing I've learned over 35 years, it's that institutions are made up of people. And even corporations, corporations are not people. I'm sorry, I disagree, but they are made up of people. And, you know, when we think about the changes we want to make with the people in our lives, how's it usually? I mean, usually you're just like, oh, you suck. You're doing terrible stuff, and you know, you never let them off the hook, right? You're never going to say anything nice to them, because then they might kind of backslide, right? That's how we handle problems with people in our lives, right? That's not what we do. That's not how we raise our children to be good people, by endlessly criticizing them and telling them how horrible they are. I would suggest that if there's one thing I found, there's some interesting parallels when we talk about institutions that we want to change, and even our society as a whole. But okay, let's bring this back to climate. I said I'm super hopeful right now, so you know, that's those might be fighting words. So let me explain. I think folks probably heard that we did pass in 2022 the biggest climate bill that has ever been passed in the US, actually in the world. Actually two. There was the Inflation Reduction Act and what's now called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. It was about $500 billion in investments in transitioning to clean energy. That happened 2 years ago. I haven't noticed that the public conversation around climate has changed that much from before we passed this massive climate bill since after. But I think that there's every reason to change it. That bill is projected to help us reduce our carbon dioxide emissions by about 40%. That's not enough to reach our Paris climate accords. I won't go into the details if you don't know what that means, but it's the international agreement on reducing on addressing climate change, we're pledged to reduce those by about 50 to 52% by 2030. This gets us not quite there, but really close to meeting that commitment. There's a fighting chance to make it with those bills that were passed. Of course, those bills were all based on, carrots, not sticks, right? It was all like incentives for people and corporations to make these investments and do the right thing. What makes me so hopeful this week is later this week, probably on Thursday, 4 really high profile, really important new rules are going to be issued by the Biden administration that address gas-fired power plants, those power plants that are being fueled with methane gas. That's been more or less like here in North Carolina, we've been looking at Duke Energy wanting to build about almost 9 gigawatts, 9,000 megawatts of new gas-fired power plants. If you don't know what that means, it's a lot. Just know that's a big number. That's a lot. And it looked like there was nothing to stop them. This rule that the Biden administration is about to release is just the tool that gives us a fighting chance to stop that build out of new gas plants and get those investments redirected towards clean and renewable energy. So those are the reasons why, and I also want to say from a justice standpoint, not only is the Biden administration doing this in a way that the reason they're doing it in April is because that's more than 6 months before the election, which means that, what the Obama administration did, they waited until the last minute to pass a bunch of rules. Then, surprise, Trump was elected, and a lot of those got rolled back because they had there's a time window within which you can use this thing called the Congressional Review Act to actually undo what the previous administration does. The Biden administration is not making that mistake. They're doing everything right. They're also dotting their I's, crossing their T's, making sure there's not stupid mistakes in there that are going to get it overturned by the Supreme Court. And lastly, they even included justice elements like the Justice 40 policy, which ensures that 40% of all these investments are going to disadvantaged, historically marginalized communities. So what makes me so hopeful is seeing the incredible competence and skill with which this is all being done. And so I guess what I will close, I think Peyton challenged us to rethink, maybe renew our attitudes towards Earth Day. And what I would offer is maybe Earth Day can be that victory party we never had, for all of those issues we were talking about. Maybe we can take stock of what collective action has gotten us so far. The other thing we can do, this is what I want to close with. That $500 billion in investments in like the Inflation Reduction Act that I talked about, that isn't assured. That number is assuming a certain behavior. And, I remember that in 1990, the 20th anniversary of Earth Day, everyone was passing around these little booklets of 100 things you can do to save the planet. And they were all really hard, like stop using a dryer and stuff like that, right? Well, the Inflation Reduction Act is very different. What that is doing, it creates all kinds of incentives to do things that people might want to do anyway, like buy an electric car, like put solar panels on their roof. But those are big ticket things, but even small things like maybe replace your aging furnace with a heat pump. There's a website called or a group and a website called rewiringamerica.org. You don't need to remember that because I'm a member of this community. So you can come to, if you're thinking about what is it that I can do to make my home more efficient and use these tax credits, talk to me. I'm around most Sundays. But that's what I would challenge us to do, to maybe mentally have a little bit of that victory party we never had for the successes of the past, and to think of and to look at maybe that one thing that we can commit to doing now to really, again, be part of this solution. And with that, I will turn it over back to Peyton.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I think it's easy to kind of get lost in the, yeah, we got this, but now the trees are being eaten by a type of bug that used to die in the winters here, but now the winters don't get cold anymore, so there's a, and that is, it's certainly not a cop out. And again, for career environmental advocates, you never want to take your eye off the ball, because there's always, we're done working on this. And a victory party, I agree. I think it's very important to maintain an upbeat approach about this. And again, when I speak after Andy speaks, I will be talking about how important that is, because you can't just wallow in despair. It's just not a possibility. So Andy, come. We heard a little bit about the air context. I think Andy, the Watauga River keeper, may get us all wet.
Thank you, Peyton, and thank you, Matt. It's a real privilege to share the microphone with Matt, a person whose work I deeply admire. Is actually Appalachian Voices. Watauga Riverkeeper started with Appalachian Voices, and it was Donna Lisenby, the founding Riverkeeper, who I wouldn't say an embittered young fishing guide. It's hard to be a bitter fishing guide when you spend your day on the boats, but I will admit to being disheartened by the condition of the Watauga. And I was walking, and Donna was giving one of her fiery lectures that she's become known for, and I stopped and listened. And like many 20-year-olds, I was like, great, somebody's gonna fix this, and got back to what I was doing. But then I started to see the changes, and I was really inspired by the courage of one person saying, absolutely not. Not in my watershed, not here, not today, not in this community, not in any community. And that kind of thing led to the Coal Ash Management Act. And those who remember the horrible coal ash spill over in Kingston, still dealing with the cleanup and the loss of life. But talk about water today. And I was honored for this invitation, but I spent the week commiserating with old friends, favorite writers. I looked to the works of Mary Oliver and Terry Tempest Williams and Wendell Berry, and then some rabble rousers like Doug Peacock and Abby. And I was like, certainly I will find a hopeful message for these fine people there. And every book I got out, I put back, and I said, well, Barry Lopez has meant a lot to me. I'll find the words to express it. And I never did. I have no reading for you today. But over here, one of the things that keeps me coming back to this fine congregation is, and service, our prayer. So it's easy to get discouraged. Matt, that was a beautiful message. Things are better than they've ever been. There's a new energy in this movement. Activists are getting better. They're getting braver. But I also think there's a real excellence and concentration and sharing of knowledge now. Like when I was a student at App, when I came to Boone 25 years ago, there wasn't a course of study dedicated to the environmental field and studies and things. So the army of new talent coming into this field is a great source of comfort for me to carry the fight forward. Our staff scientist Hannah Woodburn, I always joke that she's the brains of the operation. But the young people coming up they bring like a tactical thinking and a sense of urgency to it. That really makes me feel hope that I didn't feel 5 or 10 years ago when I started in this work. But yeah, so hope for the Watauga, right? We're going to look at it through a more local lens. So the Watauga River's changed quite a bit since European settlement, but I'm happy to say that for the first time in 140 years, by the end of next month, the Watauga River will run free from its headwaters on Grandfather Mountain all the way to the TVA impoundment, the Tennessee line. So the Watauga River throughout North Carolina will have all of our dams removed. We started the Wards Mill Dam 2 years ago. The Shoals Mill Dam is going to come out in June. So we're doing our Hellbender surveys right now, our mussel surveys. So what we're doing is we're finding these Hellbenders. Anybody seen a Hellbender? Slimy, ugly, beautiful things. But for me, a symbol of clean water, kind of what we call a indicator species of the health. And so their numbers are in decline, but following the removal of the Wards Mill Dam. We found our first clutch of eggs in that stretch. So that's the first hellbender in that stretch, probably in 140 years. And uh, uh, found a hellbender nest in Broadstone, a place where I hadn't found hellbender eggs in 25 years. So I'm hopeful we're seeing life come back to places that were dead. We're seeing new tangerine darter nests in places in the river like Cove Creek where they haven't been in probably, at least 15 years. So we found our first nest last spring, and I'm hopeful about that. And every time I get discouraged or I get mad, I turn to my books and I say, or I seek a mentor or a friend and we talk. But then it's back to work. I find hope and peace in action. So one of my favorite things to do with my children, aside from run and scream plays, is planting trees. This year we planted 25,000 trees along the Watauga. Last year we planted 45,000. The year before that, 30. So there are more trees, and not because of us, but there's more trees in the Watauga River Basin than there were 100 years ago. The water quality is arguably better now than it was 100 years ago. So when I think things are getting worse, the world is terrifying, the world is burning, we're trading our values for commodities. I take a look and I take a walk at the river. I walk down to see the trees my daughter planted, in her first year of life that are now taller than her. I'm given a lot of hope, and then hope in the community. When I first started in this job, I was pretty naive. I started out as a volunteer, and I was a fishing guide, and I was teaching resource policy at app, and I had a baby girl on the way, and I was terrified. I didn't know what was going to become of this world, and they were looking for a river keeper, and so I said, well, I'm pretty pissed about the way things are going. Maybe let's do something. When I started, I was very naive. I was like, oh, this is going to be the easiest job I've ever had. Like, an army of people are going to open their checkbooks and come and say, oh my goodness, we were just waiting for you. Here is a check. Here is a high five. How can we help? And it was pretty lonely at the start. I remember I walked into my office, which was just a little bit bigger than this piano bench. And I sat down with a fresh legal pad and a sharpened pencil. And it's like, what next? I didn't know what to do. What next? But I knew I wasn't going to solve it in that office. So I got my waiters, and then I went out and I started talking to fishermen, started looking for problems. And sure enough, if you start looking, you'll find some. We found a gas spill in the Watauga. We found, sewage leaks. So made a list and just started ticking things off. And something that Matt said hit with me. Why don't we celebrate our victories? And we have a kind of a sad truism in the conservation field, but victories are temporary and losses are forever. You get one chance to protect, say, a swath of old growth forest, or to in some cases save a species that we're losing. We've lost a lot of biodiversity here in the Southern Appalachians, and once a mountain's gone or a swath of old ghost forest is taken where we lose a species, it's forever, right? So you can save them once, but save them again. But if they put something there, say a coal mine or a gas powered plant or a golf course, that might be forever. But it is really important to acknowledge those victories, and some of these losses that I'm talking about that I always thought were permanent are now proven to be temporary with renewed energy, things like that. I remember in that first lonely week of river keeping, I found just a really disgusting massive sewer discharge into the Watauga, just kind of straight piping human waste, right? And I was like, well, what are we going to do? And we got after it, we got it cleaned up, started a program called Swim Guide. So as a data-driven program, we rely on staff and volunteers to collect water samples. We analyze them in our lab or send them to commercial lab, and then we use those to track and stop pollution, right? But last September, we used this data to successfully reclassify the Watauga as outstanding resource water from all through North Carolina, from the headwaters on Grandfather and 11 of her tributaries. So what a reclassification means longer lasting protection. So we have a limit on no new discharges into the Watauga, no new discharges into her tributaries of certain uses, right? And then we're looking at swifter and harsher penalties for violation, right? So from that first disgusting, I had to throw out the pair of shoes I wore the first week. Couldn't bring them back into the house because they reeked of sewage and then petrochemicals. But so things like removing the dams, planting the trees, and changing, land use restrictions and tightening those discharge laws is going to have a lasting generational change on the Watauga, and that gives me hope. But also, we had a little fly fishing film festival last night downtown, and I was delighted. Kind of like this congregation here today, but the variety of people who are coming out to show up for the river. So there, people, maybe the fishing drew them in, but I saw a lot of people there who didn't fish. They're just there because they love the river and they wanted to be part of their river family. Yeah, and these big federal changes that we're seeing, particularly excited about some of the funding for new projects in the Inflation Reduction Act and all the hard work people are doing at that level. But I'm really delighted by the change here in our community. The diversity in ages and education that are showing up to help the river, and then also kind of the mindset change. When I first started fighting pollution here locally, I was met with a lot of apathy. I met with the farmer to talk to him about fencing his cattle at a stream, and we're talking about what kind of changes I make. And he told me something that haunts me to this day, and reminds me to always dress professionally. He said, "Awfully tough talk for somebody who wears a pink bathing suit to work." Because I was wearing a bathing suit because I've been taking samples, and then we shook hands, and he also hit me with soft hands, bud. You've been counting money your whole life. Two things that haunted me, but I showed up the next day, better dressed in work boots and pants, and we built that fence together. And then about 7 years later, we took out the Wards Mill Dam together that his grandfather had built. And a moment that I never thought would come, because we always thought that dam was going to be there forever. And then maybe think about what else was possible. So that's where I find the hope, is in direct action and in our community, and thinking about what else can be done. We've come a really long way, and we've got further to go. Yeah. So if you'd like to get involved in direct action, we'd love to have you as part of Mountain Tree. Come plant trees with us. Collect some water samples. You can engage with us in our legislative policy. But yeah, thank you so much.
And I'd reiterate what Matt said. All three of us are, we really eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff. And, myself with a legal background, it's just a common statement. If I don't know the answer, I know where to find it. We all have that awareness and a lot of that connectivity here. So if you're thinking about something, you're not sure, I know Andy's websites have a fabulous amount of information where you'd find out about these events. I think maybe, we already put so much stuff into the blast. I don't know how much we can put in about the farm cafe goings on, and but there is room for that, and this is a good place to keep track of all that. So, yeah, hold on. So the idea that I would be following up with the talk, first of all, I am extremely hopeful as well. I don't see any upside to not being hopeful. I think it's a little counterintuitive for me, having a science and a law background and having really cut my teeth with organizations that were really in your face about these things. Their answers were, no, you can't do that. If you do it, we'll sue you. If the law says you need to do this and issue regulations and you don't do it, we're going to sue you. We're going to spend gobs of money on high quality science talent. We're going to make sure we marshal all the facts. We're going to, show up with people that you can't shout down. You can't, you can bring your own experts, et cetera, et cetera. Very, confrontational sort of approach. And I'm here to say, and again, my group in some respects, High Country Watch is, in my mind anyway, similarly set. We want to be the member of the community that doesn't have to worry about offending anybody because of their, views about this and that. It's either, again, right or wrong from a legal or a science standpoint. And I've kind of, as I said, staked out that ground for this group in this area because none of the other groups are really, I don't want to say none. I know you guys bring lawsuits and he's obviously prepared to do that with Mountain True. But their constituency is such that I think they have to walk a little more gingerly around these things. So anyway, I come from a background where, no, we're not going to let this happen. Let's marshal the resources we need to go the other way. I'm not sure that's a good model going forward. And I'm going to talk about that. So again, much of what concerned the three of us as we prepared for the service was a perception that Earth Day has failed to ignite a level of activism and environmental stewardship, more broadly, that it was one time was expected. Obviously, I don't know that the problems that gave rise to the awareness in 1970 have changed markedly. They're just different stripes and maybe more complicated. But there have been a lot of positive responses, and I think we have a lot to be proud of in terms of the folks that worked on it and the people as a whole. One of the things I think Andy mentioned was dealing with local members of the community and having a conversation with somebody to get their awareness that we're kind of all in this together and how can we work together, et cetera, is kind of a again, it's a different way of doing it, but I think it bears a lot of fruit. But sort of in general, but rather than focus on the failure of the original Earth Day initiative that was spawned by those disasters, Love Canal, as I said, the oil spill off the coast of California, again, before Matt was born. I think you guys have shown that there is a lot going on that we can be happy, be upbeat about. My thoughts relate to answering the question of what should I do, and I'm speaking to you guys and to myself. And one theme of this will be that you can't stop reminding yourself that you need to have this approach because it's easy to fall back into things that we've been doing forever, which is again very confrontational, very us and them. Again, we see that in so many things, and part of the message, and this comes a little bit from the inspiration, somewhat from today, from Thich Nhat Hanh about what I refer to as interbeing. It was a notion that was championed by this great Buddhist prophet who passed in 22, I believe, and it's been embraced by a lot of other people. I've been doing some reading about it. It was not a concept I was really totally familiar with, but it's essentially built on the awareness that all life and matter is sentient. And we've been hearing a little bit about this, like water has memory. How does water have memory exactly? Do we understand these things fully? And the answer is no. And to be open-minded about a lot of this stuff is half the battle. And to me, it mirrors sort of my understanding of the Native American tradition and perspective, which shows reverence and respect for natural systems in life and a dedication to gratitude and reciprocity. Again, we do have so much to be thankful for. Sometimes we don't have the time to express it, feel it. Again, a little bit, again, as a mirror, we're looking at environmental concerns and issues, and we're often jumping from one to the next. And as Matt was saying, actually take a second and say, well, we actually helped and we did a good job. And that's something good to share with other people, again, in terms of the community and the individual connectivity, so they can remain positive. So how do individuals put interbeing strategy into action for environmental protection? I see the strategy as having several components. The first is nature awareness. Again, I think Andy spoke a little bit about that. Come out to the river, see what we're doing, get kids involved. But again, to a large extent, for me, it's a matter of sort of getting a little bit of a bath or a shower in what is nature, what does nature have to offer, stepping back, letting it sink in. Again, it's a absorptive sort of piece of this approach, as far as I'm concerned, that I think is critical. So you're participating in nature, you're seeing it, its complexity, you're drawing on it for spiritual energy and support. This feeds an interbeing awareness in which humanity is seen as a nature participant and not a manager or a custodian. The awareness can raise and fill your spirit. It can also serve to alert you when something you encounter is not right. I was going to add a see something, say something note here. And I think that's important when you're out in nature. You know, Andy was walking along the river and saw, you know, a pipe. It's like, whoa, whoa, it's like a picture. What doesn't belong here? And if you're out in nature, you see something messed up, somebody's clear cutting a big stand and it's not there, you know, whatever. Talk to one of us because we might know how to bring that to somebody else's attention. The first part, awareness, like I said, is something that can alert you to a need that we can fix. The second component involves perhaps the most important and challenging aspect, at least for me, and it involves having positive relationships and interactions with all people, regardless of their religious and political predispositions. It seems pretty clear that if widespread change to policies and institutions contributing to global warming, as an example, and environmental degradation is to occur, it will require new approaches that do not rely on force or perpetuate a culture of separation. We're actually having a service on May 5th. It's a musical performance by Andrew McKnight. It'll focus on, you know, finding a way to interact favorably with people who don't get it. And I say that as a segue. In the world of interbeing, you can't say somebody doesn't get it. So don't, again, that's why this is hard. This is hard. You can't go and lecture to somebody and say you're wrong. You can't, this is not the starting point. It's very hard, very difficult. But we're going to hopefully keep working on the tools. And again, there's support when you're in that moment of like how to proceed. Finally, there must be an awareness of the inherent value of incremental change. Working for change, one person, one cause, one need at a time must not be a deal breaker for you continue to have individual buy-in with respect to your work. In addition, change need not be focused solely on environmental issues to contribute to the type of global and institutional change that is needed to solve climate change, for example. I was speaking with some folks earlier about that. You know, you're providing help with hospice care for somebody and somebody's going to yell at you for not donating on climate change. I feel it's kind of a mosaic and a continuum that is involved in serving humanity and the connectivity that is going to support the broader designs. So if you're involved in meeting community needs on other fronts with respect to other social or political concerns, I say keep it up. The concept of interbeing builds on all efforts across a broad spectrum of social and environmental need. In short, no one need feel like they are dropping the environmental advocacy ball just because their efforts are focused on some other societal problem. Those are kind of my thoughts. I kind of see several services just about these topics, but I'm going to let it go with that for now. I know they could have taken questions in the moment, but I'm going to go ahead and open things up for a discussion. Time we are at. We're already at noon. So just a few minutes. I'm going to do the reverse here. I'm going to start on Zoom because I feel like sometimes the folks on Zoom get short shrift in terms of their ability to ask questions. So anybody on Zoom have any thoughts about sort of what we're talking about today? Feeling upbeat, feeling depressed still? I hope they're not still depressed. Oh, sure. The folks.
I'll read the what I was just going to say. I thank you for leading this informative program and promoting advocacy with the appropriate resources, personally and nationally. And it helps me with conversation at every opportunity. Thank you.
Oh, of course, you're welcome, Evelyn. I was going to help. Manny's got his hand up. Manny, go ahead.
I came in late, excuse me, but for the speaker who spoke about, it was two before you, who had worked in the field for 30 some odd years.
That's Matt.
Matt, I had a friend at Unitarian up in Washington Church, Unitarian Universal Church of Fairfax, who stated that he had been very involved. I kind of Googled him because of the day, and passed away. And he worked in Nelson's office. I don't know if you know of him. I couldn't see anything. I did get names of people who were like, they called them coordinators for So one, he was before you would have been there, but I'm wondering if there any records you can get a hold of from Nelson's office, or could somebody get him? The guy's name was John Heritage, and I'm just kind of curious. He sounded like he was very involved in it, but he had some mental issues. I don't know how much was real and how much he really did, but he said he was very, very knowledgeable about the whole thing. So he was involved with planning the first Earth Day.
Yeah, it was Gaylord Nelson was a senator at the time, and then he retired and worked for the Sierra Club, I believe. I actually met him very briefly when I was with NRDC in 1981. Years later, I think he started Wilderness Society as well. Could be another group. Yeah, I don't know about the documentation around that, Manny, but I bet there are some answers out there. And
by the way, thank you, and I love your description. It's people, they're the blessing and the curse. So I just love what people are trying to do. You can't give up the fight. You know, a good friend of mine years ago said sometimes, you know, the perfect is the enemy of the good, or even sometimes if you're doing better at it, it's number one step. You know, the one solution causes other problems. So it's but we kind of have to do it. And if we don't do anything, nothing will get done. So even if it's thank you for your work.
well, as I said, I think the key ingredient here is not to be frustrated by the speed of things. Forward progress is indeed progress, and by trying to do too much too fast, sometimes we do trip over ourselves or make waves that make the other side not an interbeing concept, a little bit more. There's a lot, as we know, fear is a big issue. The people that have the power, the people that are economically invested in things have a lot to lose if the current situation, the current institutions aren't allowed to continue forever. So there's a lot at stake for a lot of people. And we're not going to overcome that, by a broad side against it. It's going to actually have to be all of us acting in small measures. Anybody else on Zoom? I was going to make a joke about the Sunset Beach folks are out doing what I said, which is enjoying the environment, walking in the dunes and appreciating what's going on there. Anybody here like to make a comment or ask something? Come on up. You want to come up or?
Hey, my name is Lynn, and I just had two things. The first was going to be, are there any events that are happening tomorrow that we can potentially interact with?
Let Matt answer that.
Yeah, there is going to be a at the Jones house. I after 5 o'clock, I think. I'm not sure the exact details, but I think tomorrow evening at the Jones house on the lawn, there's going to be a little local Earth Day event that people could go to.
Okay, gotcha. And then my second thing was just as a Black person and learning about the history of environmental racism, I just wanted to ask you, how do you coincide with interbeing with from what I've learned about just environmental racism, what I've seen and experienced, it's hard for me to grapple with, how can I say? Yeah, because the enemy actively has seeked to destroy not just my people, but Native Americans as well. And it's not a thing of they don't know, they know, and they actively try to destroy. So I'm trying to understand how interbeing can help make a space for empathy or understanding, even in a space that doesn't seem like it can be.
Well, again, not an expert about this topic. I'm still learning. And I'm not throwing out the science and legal bath with or the water with the bath. I knew I'd lose that one. I still believe that there's a role for that to play. I just don't think it can no longer be what we lead with. We can't just show up with somebody and say, we're going to hit you over the head if we do this. So some examples that I've heard about really in the social justice sort of context is really just killing with kindness, hugging to death. I'm not really sure all those things. certainly awareness in a community that something's coming in, that something might be wanting to come in to our community. It has toxic effects. There's a lot more resources. Again, looking from the top down, environmental justice is a policy issue for federal agencies. I really am not that well versed in what's going on in the state, but I think local information, local action. I was on the board of directors call yesterday with the Blue Ridge Environmental Defense League, which my organization is a subchapter. And just to see what's being accomplished at the local level. And again, these broader organizations have a lot of resources or some resources that can be brought to bear. But again, I'm really trying to focus on what we can do as individuals. So again, in that moment, I think the answer is a little bit of, they can't put themselves in your shoes. And so it's how do I share some of that information about how this is hurting me or hurting my, I won't say hurting my feelings, but emotionally, injuring me in a way that you would understand if I was coming to your neighborhood to do this. So that's a little bit of it. As I said, I think there's some superstructure of ways of using the system, but it's otherwise really just it's a gut check and a swallow your pride and just have a talk with the people that are there. Like, so where are you from? What, just get to know the enemy in some respects. And again, one step at a time. I mean, some of it is getting rid of stuff that's come and now we need to get rid of it. But Kelly. Yeah, we have time for a couple more.
I'm Kelly Lynn. I have been, as an 8th grade teacher, taking kids out on the New River, not the Watauga River, but the New River for almost 10 years now, every fall, as a kickoff to at Two Rivers, we do these expeditions with our students, and this is our kickoff to our water expedition that we do every fall. And one thing I've noticed over the last 10 years, the changes I've seen in the river is the sediment buildup. There's an invasive species of a plant. Is that right? That I can't think of the plant's name, but there are many. And that are causing this. I'm curious about what, I don't know. I guess what can be done about that? Not necessarily what I personally can do, but is there anything that can be done about that? And the other question that I have is, are you guys willing to come talk to middle school students about water and environmental stuff? I would love, okay, so I'll be getting in touch with all of you at some point in the future. But
yes, we'd be delighted to come to your school. So yeah, the sedimentation and invasive species. So these are all symptoms of climate change, I'm afraid. So what we're seeing here in the high country affecting our waterways is what's hand in hand with development. So what we're seeing is a lot of, I think, in my opinion, first wave climate refugees, right? Folks who are fleeing hotter, more fiery places for the luxury of the cool nights in the high country, right? So the increased development, right? We're seeing more sediment transport into the waterways, land use change. And as the climate changes, as Peyton talked to earlier, winters aren't staying cold, right? So we're seeing things like multiflora rose, Japanese knotweed, barberry, all manner of things come, but also we're seeing aquatic invasives as well. Now that our waters in many cases are warming, right? So part of development is the loss of the riparian corridor, the trees that grow along the waterway. So one of the best ways we can do it is there's direct action, which is planting trees, restoring the riparian zone, removing the dams, and then, legislative fix. So one thing our organization is pushing for is a expansion and mandatory trout buffer, so on waters that are cold enough to support trout is, codifying that you have to keep an intact buffer. And then rivers, like people, are resilient, right? So the sediment will build up now, but you know, the natural function of a river is sediment transport. So if we remove the dams and restore the riparian corridor, that sediment we're seeing now will someday be new beaches in the Gulf. You know, so if we take out all the barriers in between now and then, and for the invasive, it's, you know, um, planting native trees, planting species that support our pollinators, and can talk more about that when we come to your school.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Lynn. Kelly. Yeah, Phoebe, you can go ahead real quick.
Okay, I'd just like to say, for over a decade, our congregation had adopted part of the Watauga River near the Greenway, and we did twice a year river cleanups. And I was in charge the first 10 years or so, and then a couple other people took over, and then it died. But I wish we would do that again. And also UUA has a thing called Green Sanctuary. And we, for quite a while, worked to become a green sanctuary and stay a green sanctuary. And I'm glad to work on those things again, but being 70, I still have some kayaks people can borrow if people are willing to help clean the river, and we could plant trees and do other things these fellas suggested today with our, I think our sign is still up where it says
Yeah,
adopted by the UUA or by the Arians.
Sorry, I saw that sign driving away from the rec center. I don't know if anybody else, go ahead.
But
Yeah,
we
just
haven't
really
lived-
quickly, we just talked about it at the last board meeting last month. I believe the date we said we would like to do that next river cleanup is June 16th. That is a week after our general meeting. So stay tuned. There'll be more information and an invitation to help with that cleanup. So no, we're not giving that up, Phoebe. I think we're going to bring
Oh,
it back.
That's great. We used to have lunch potluck and then I'll go out to the river together.
All right. Thanks, Phoebe, for rattling our cage or reminding us of that. Guys, like I said, I saw that sign. I'm like, BUUF. What could that be other than us? It must be us. So, all right. We have one more hymn I'd like to sing. I think we're going to cut the rest short. I know Andy and Matt will probably be here for a minute, as well as me, if there are other questions and things like that. We're going to sing Blue Boat Home, which is number 1064 in the blue hymnal. And then we'll extinguish the chalice. Ocean standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean, still my trembling heart can say, on and on all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. Wide universe, the ocean I'm level, and the earth is my blue. Sun, my sailing moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companion, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heaven in our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, greet the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue gold. It's beautiful. Thank you. As we extinguish the light that guides our fellowship in this space, remember that that light will remain part of us deep inside. We need only remember to look for it. Thank you, everybody, and go in peace.